Good morning or good afternoon. It's Miss Bauer again, and today we're starting Unit 2 with conditional statements. Now, conditional statements are all about conditions. For example, if it's raining, well, then I'm probably going to wear rain boots because it's raining. Or if I'm tired, then I'm going to have some coffee. Conditional statements are all about the condition. And what we do in math is we look at those statements, rearrange them, and then determine the validity of them, if they're true or if they're false. So a conditional statement's all about the conditions, which means it has to have the words if and then. So a conditional statement is just an if-then statement. And to keep it simple for now with these examples, I'm just going to use some symbols. So instead of writing out a full sentence, I'm going to say if you're in love, or if heart, then you're usually happy. So smiley face. That's our if-then statement. Now the hypothesis is the part that comes after the if. And if you guessed it, the conclusion would be after the then. So it's not if whatever, the hypothesis is just what's after the if. So it would just be the heart. And the conclusion would be what's after the then. So the conclusion's not then, smiley face. The conclusion is just smiley face. Now, one of the ways that we can tweak these statements is by taking the converse, which flips the statement around. Now, keep in mind that all of our statements are going to be if-then statements. So as we start tweaking them with converse, inverse, contrapositive, they all still need to have if something, then something in that order. So if something, then something. And what we do is we change this part of it, but we always keep the if and the then. Always, always. So if I'm going to flip this, it wouldn't be if heart, then smiley face. It should be if something, then something. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the hypothesis and the conclusion. So I'm going to make it if smiley face. If you're happy, then you're loved. Notice that I kept the if and the then. All I did was just take these parts right here and flip them. That's converse. Now, the easy way to remember converse is that converse is a type of shoe that goes on your feet, as is flip-flops. So remember, converse, shoes, feet, flip-flops, flip. Now, inverse means that we not or negate the statement. Sometimes you'll look up the word, it will say opposite, negate. All of those things mean that we not the statement. So, instead of if love, if happy heart, I'm going to say if not a heart like that. It would be if what's the opposite of a full heart? A broken heart. So when I negate or when I not the statement, I'm not changing the order. I'm keeping everything the same, but now I'm putting a not or the opposite. So for example, if it is raining, if it is not raining, if she passed the test, if she failed the test, I'm thinking opposites. And if the heart is broken, then we'll think if it's not happy, then it's going to be a sad face. But notice that I didn't change the order at all. So I'm always going back to my original statement. Now, contrapositive is a long word. That's because the contrapositive is a flip it and not it. So just remember, the long one means that we do both. We flip it and we not it. So we're still keeping if and then. But now I'm going to flip it and not it. So it wouldn't be if heart, then smiley face. It would be if, take the smiley face and make it a frowny face. Then not a heart, but then a broken heart. I know my pictures aren't the greatest, but that's okay. So if you kind of catch it, the order changes as we go a little bit. So heart, smiley face, heart, and then they break and then they switch. So those are our 4 main statements, but remember that they all go back to the conditional statement and they all have the words if and then. Now, what we do is we look at the validity of those statements, and then that's part of math, that's part of geometry, is figuring out, are they true, are they false? Can you give me an example why? Going from there. Now, a biconditional is what happens when your statements all work. So it's whenever the conditional and the converse are true. So it's when the conditional and the converse are both true. And the way to think of it is that your conditional is forwards and your converse goes backwards. It's when it's flipped. So your statement should read forwards and backwards. They're both true. They check out. And if that's the case, then you could say if and only if blah, 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 blah. So if and only if. And instead of writing that out, we would replace if and only if with IFF. So what you can do to write a biconditional is if it all works out, you can just go back to your original conditional. Instead of if, you can do if and only if, but we'll do IFF for short, and you'll see that there in just a second. Now, if you can't write a biconditional, meaning that the statements aren't true, well, then it has to be false. So a counterexample would be something that disproves your statement. But it has to meet the conditions whenever it disproves it. So for example, if it's raining, then I'm going to wear rain boots. Well, a counterexample would be if it's raining, but I'm not wearing rain boots. That's your counterexample. So you can't say, oh, well, you're wearing tennis shoes on a day where it's sunny. That doesn't disprove anything because it's not raining. So the way that a counterexample has to work is that the hypothesis has to be true. The first part, the condition, has to be met. So think of it as a if yes, then no situation. So if yes, then no situation. So let's take a look at an example with math. So it says 2 points are collinear if they lie on the same line. Well, the first thing that I need to do is fix this statement. So I'm going to write it as a conditional. So it should have the words if and then in it. And they should all have the words if and then. But now I need to rewrite this, because if you notice, there's no then in that statement. So it said if they lie on the same line. So if they, well, what is they? 2 points. So if 2 points lie on the same line, we'd like to put our subject first. If they lie doesn't make as much sense as saying if 2 points lie. So if 2 points lie on the same line, then they are collinear. Now I can switch to they. So if 2 points lie on the same line, then they are collinear. Ask yourself, is that true or is that false? And if you think back to Unit 1, collinear meant that they were on the same line. So yeah, this is true. Okay, now converse, if you scroll back up to the top, if you look at your notes, converse means that I'm going to flip things. And I'm go ahead and I'm highlighting these so it's a little bit easier for us to read. So I highlighted the hypothesis in yellow and I have the conclusion in green. Remember, our hypothesis is after the if and the conclusion is after the then. So converse means I'm going to flip those parts. I'm still going to start with if and then, but now I'm going to flip it. So I'm not going to say if 2 points lie on the same line, then they're collinear. I'm going to say if 2 points are collinear, then they lie on the same line. And it's okay if your grammar's a little bit off. A lot of people will say if they are, but I'm going to always do that if 2 points, just so we know what we're talking about. So if 2 points are collinear, that's the main point here, then they lie on the same line. So I switched up my hypothesis and conclusion. I flipped them because converse means flip. Now ask yourself, is that true or is that false? If 2 points are collinear, do they lie on the same line? And that's true. Now, inverse, if you go back up, think, what does inverse mean? Not or opposite. So I'm not going to change the order of anything, and I'm still having that if and that then. All I'm going to do is negate or opposite. So that would be if 2 points do not lie on the same line. So I'm throwing the word not in there because I'm doing the opposite. So if 2 points do not lie on the same line, then they are not collinear. So I kept the order the same as the original, as my conditional, or sometimes I'll call it OG. But all that I did, so I kept the same order, all that I did was I just added in the word not. Now, contrapositive is the long one. Oh, and if we go back one, is that true or is that false? If points don't lie on the same line, then are they collinear? No, they're not. If they're not on the same line, then they're not collinear, so that's true. Now, for contrapositive, that's where we flip it and we not it. So I think it's helpful to always keep that if-then. But now I'm going to flip these and not it. So it wouldn't be if they are collinear. It would be if 2 points are not collinear. So if you think about it, I'm kind of just going to where I already flipped it. I'm going there and I'm just adding the word not. So if 2 points are not collinear, then they are, or then they do not lie on the same line. Now, it's okay if your grammar is not perfect. So I know that if 2 points are not collinear, or maybe you say if they not lie on the same line, but try not to use caveman talk. Try to read your sentences and make sure, are they grammatically sound? Do they sound all right? So for contrapositive, notice it was if yellow then green, and now I have if green then yellow, and I throw the word not in there. Then asking yourself, is that true or is that false? If 2 points are not collinear, well, yeah, then they don't lie on the same line. That's true. Okay, now the part where we have to go back and look and assess is we need to figure out, can we write a biconditional or a counter example? It's one or the other. You can't have a statement that's true and false. So we're asking ourselves, can we write a biconditional or a counter example? Now, biconditional is when the conditional and converse were true. So go back and look, are the conditional and the converse true? Did the statement work forwards and backwards? Well, yeah, it did. So all that I'm going to do is replace that if with if and only if. So I can write a biconditional the conditional, and the converse were both true. So what I'm going to do is I can take my conditional statement, and all I'm going to do is replace the if with if and only if. Now, a biconditional is a good definition. I can replace that if with if and only if because it works in all cases. So, if and only if. And if you don't want to write all that out, then guess what? You can just write IFF. So, if and only if 2 points lie on the same line, then they are collinear. Now, that works, but if you really want to sound grammatically correct, then the best way to do it is to put that if and only if in the middle. It's to take your hypothesis and your conclusion and then put if and only if between them. So what would be involved with that would be rearranging it. So instead of saying if and only if 2 points lie on the same line, I would say 2 points lie on the same line if and only if, take out that then, they are collinear. So basically what I did was I took the yellow part and I took the green part and I put if and only if in the middle. And yeah, I'm aware you can't really drag and drop if you're writing it on paper. It's not as easy. So the one we had before worked as well if you replace the if with IFF. Just remember that biconditionals, when it's true, if and only if needs to be in your statement. And we're going to take a look at a few more examples and then